Late night hikers, what is the creepiest thing you have seen while hiking? I used to spend my summers bouldering with my friends near a fairly large forest about an hour and a half from where I lived, and we often camped there overnight to save on travel costs and time. On what was roughly our third or fourth trip, my friend left all her climbing gear and her rucksack just outside her tent, or at least we were sure she did. The next morning her boots, a few pieces of clothing, and all her chalk powder had disappeared. We told ourselves she must have misplaced them, even though we were pretty sure they'd been next to her tent. We didn't want to believe they'd been stolen, so we assumed she'd left them by the boulders and some animal had taken an interest. At the time that explanation felt reasonable. Fast forward a year, we were in the same spot, sitting by the tents and relaxing after dinner. It was pitch black, and only the camp area was lit by the fire. I walked a little way out of sight to pee and saw a guy in a full-on ghillie suit lying on his stomach, staring directly at our campsite. I kind of froze, and the moment he realized I'd spotted him he bolted. I don't know whether the incident the year before was connected to that ghillie suit guy, but it stuck with all of us, and we haven't camped there since, which is a real shame. For a few years in my early 20s I lived on the East Coast, right along the Blue Ridge Mountains, and I often went on short day hikes with a few friends along the marked paths whenever we were all free. A few times I went alone, but I always stuck to the same areas and knew my way around well. On this particular day I waited a little later into the afternoon for my friends, but they ended up busy and I, feeling fat after a whole pizza for lunch with soda, decided to hop in the car and hike it off by myself to ease my guilty conscience. There are some particular trails I like to use. They shoot you straight up an incline to get your cardio in quick and hard, then an adjoining smaller path winds you back down around the other side of the ridge. About a third of the way down, there are trees to the right and a steepish hill on the left that drops to a low spot where I can usually spot deer herds and other fun stuff. I struggled going up that day and I had started later than usual, so it was probably around 7 to 7:10 p.m. when I reached the fork and turned downhill. Mid-fall, that meant it was fairly dark. As I was walking, I noticed a person in the valley. She wore a long, pale pinkish-white dress, and from the way she kept changing positions and shuffling around it looked like she was in the middle of a photo shoot. I could not see the photographer, and it was pretty late for pictures, but I figured the camera person was in the tree lean finishing up after golden hour. I stopped for a second, thinking how great a spot it was for some awesome shots. All of a sudden it was as if she fell. She did not lower herself, no crouching or sitting motion. One moment she was standing, and the next she was face down with her legs bent under her. A shiver ran down my neck. Without taking my eyes off her, I saw her start crawling on all fours straight up the hill toward the trail. She was not on her knees, she was basically running on her hands and feet. Maybe I was just freaked out, but she was closing in way faster than it seemed like she should have. It was almost like she was sped up while the rest of the world moved normally. I wish I could say I pulled out my phone for video evidence, or at least took a picture, or was brave and kicked some spooky ass, but an intense feeling of danger hit me and I half fell, half ran the rest of the way to the parking lot without looking back once. I peeled out of there and have not returned. The weirdest part is that my car was the only one in the lot when I got back, and that area is not really accessible from any other parking spots I know. I chalked it up to crazy drugs and nothing more, but who knows. I told my friends, and a few of them went out later that night to investigate. Super duper smart idea, I know, but nobody has seen anything like that out there since. Not hiking so much as car camping, but we were way the fuck out there in the middle of nowhere on Bureau of Land Management land in Colorado. We drove for an hour and a half down a Forest Service road and didn't see another soul. You could see headlights and hear cars from miles away from our campsite, so it's not like somebody could have snuck up unnoticed. We had 3 cars with us and 8 people. We had just finished dinner and cleaned up. It was getting dark, so we went back to the cars real quick before hitting our tents for the night. Somebody had slashed the front right tire on each of the 3 cars with what looked like a box cutter. Everyone thought it was a prank, but it became very apparent, very quickly that it wasn't. All of us were beyond spooked, like panicking, scary to watch Spooked. We all had spares, and one dude had a gun, so we threw on our donuts while that guy literally guarded us and got the hell out of there. I still have nightmares about it sometimes. Just knowing there was some person, probably watching us, maybe wanting to harm us, makes me feel physically ill to this day. I go hiking in the woods that permeate my town, sometimes so late that I get to see the sun rise out there. The strangest thing I ever saw was what I could only describe as a shanty town built up seemingly overnight, deep in the woods. Simple little hovels made of scrap metal and bed sheets surrounded a small fire pit someone had made out of an old tire, with the fire still burning, but that was not the weird part. The weird part was that it was well past midnight when I found this place, and it was quiet as a grave. There was no one there. Someone went to the trouble of getting a fire going and then left it. From the look of it, this place could hold about a dozen people, yet there was nothing there but the fire they abandoned and whatever possessions they had left in the shanties. When I was younger and stupider and going to college in the North Georgia mountains, my friends and I would go night hiking a lot on the trails near campus. I got pretty familiar with the area and being out in the wilderness at night in general, which probably made me too confident. One night the full moon was out and the weather was perfect, so visibility was crazy good, everything was washed in dim blue light. I was slightly stoned and feeling adventurous, and I love doing fun stuff alone, so I decided to enjoy a night hike by myself. I took a flashlight, but this was around 2002, so no cell phone. I chose a super easy trail that was mostly flat, maybe a mile loop, in a pretty secluded area, but not exactly a national park or anything. I did not even need my flashlight for most of it and just hiked in the moonlight. It was actually a really cool, beautiful experience at first. At some point I started feeling uneasy, and maybe a millisecond later I heard a man's voice. It was coming from a good distance ahead of me, somewhere off in the woods, maybe to the right of the trail. He was crying. I am an empathetic person, and 99% of the time I hear someone crying I want to comfort or help them in some way, but this time I felt sick to my stomach, like a dry panic attack. I remember coming very close to calling out to him, because my brain was trying to tell me he might be hurt, which was the only reason I hesitated, but it was as if my body shut my voice down before I could say anything, and I knew I had to stay very quiet. He was sobbing like he'd just found out a loved one had died, but also gibbering and almost babbling, like he was less than a person. There was a shrillness under his crying, as if he were holding back a scream, on, as if he had been doing it all night. I remember it vividly, and my spine is tingling like crazy even as I write this. I knew deep down he was not right in the head, and nothing good would happen if he realized I was listening. I went back the way I came. It was like I had tunnel hearing, and the only sound in the world was that crying. I was hyper-aware of everything around me and beyond paranoid that I would snap a branch or snag my boot on something. I worried the man's crying would get louder if I was not paying razor-sharp attention, getting closer, or turning into an outraged scream. Thankfully it just faded the farther I got from it, and I made it back to my car. Still, I was convinced some wild-eyed hermit was going to rush out of the forest and bite me to death right up to the second I locked my doors and got the fuck out of there. I finally had the rest of my panic attack on the drive back. I managed to park at campus and just sat in the car to collect myself. Adrenaline is powerful. I have never felt a shred of guilt about leaving that guy crying out in the woods in the dark. I know I was slightly stoned, but slightly is the key word. I am convinced to this day I was in very real danger that night. It is definitely not as insane as most of the stories and threads like this, but sometimes I get that same sick feeling deep down whenever I wonder what might have happened if the moon had been less bright, or if I had been more responsible and decided to use my flashlight even once. He would have seen me for sure. This happened to me a few years ago. I used to go to school at the University of California, Santa Cruz. I'm a runner, and the campus sits in a beautiful redwood forest, so I would run on the trails. One day I left a little later than usual for a run through one of the more isolated trails. Here's where it gets weird. I was about 15 minutes into the woods and still hadn't seen anyone else around. Suddenly, up ahead, I saw what appeared to be a homeless man in ragged clothing walking on the trail. He was heading deeper into the woods, and this path went very, very far while the sun was setting, so he was basically spending the night out there. I wanted to reach my usual running checkpoint before turning back, so I decided to keep my distance and run by. As soon as I passed him he called out, "What came first, light or sound?" In my head I was like, what the fuck, this guy is nuts, but I decided to humor him and yelled back, "Light," without looking. He said, "Well, I think it's sound, but who knows," and started mumbling to himself. I continued on. I reached my goal and started to head back. It was really dark now, and I was feeling sketched out that I had to pass this guy again to get back. He seemed pretty crazy and potentially dangerous, but I didn't have a choice. I got past the point where I had first passed him, but he was nowhere to be seen. There weren't any other branches of the trail, and if he had headed back I would have seen him. He must have gone off the trail. Suddenly a girl from up on a hill screamed for me to stop. I stopped and looked up, but it was too dark to see anything. I was freaked out. I called to ask if she was alright and eventually saw her climbing down. The hill was really steep, so she had put in a lot of effort to get up there and away from whatever was after her. She said she had been on a run when a scary homeless guy started harassing her and chased her up the hill, but she didn't know where he went. She was going to spend the night there until I came along because she was too scared to go back down. At this point we both wanted to get the hell out of there. Who knew if this creepy man was lurking in the dark, watching us? We ran back together and made it to the road. She thanked me and we parted ways. I never ran that trail again. Santa Cruz can be a pretty weird place. I've heard legends of students flunking out of school there and then just living in the forest. Maybe this guy was a student from years past. One night my friend and I decided to hike to the top of a small mountain to watch a meteor shower. There were 4 of us, all around 16 at the time, and we thought it would be cool. We drove over and started hiking. We took a break about halfway up when we noticed a guy following us, in a business suit. We were weirded out, so we decided to start walking again and picked up the pace. But by the next time we stopped, he was like 10 feet away. We decided to see if he would just walk past us. He didn't. He stopped and asked if we were there for the meteor shower and if he could walk with us. It was weird, a 30-something-year-old man in a suit wanting to hike with 4 16-year-olds, but whatever. As we kept walking, my friend and I noticed he was walking really close to our friend, the only girl in the group, like close enough to smell her shampoo. We got to the top, sat down, and he sat down almost right up on her. She was understandably freaked out, so I made up an excuse about needing to leave early, and we booked it the fuck out of there, nearly running the whole way down. When we got back to the car, we thought, cool, we ditched the weirdo. But no, when we were all in the car, my friend pointed out that the guy was full-on sprinting down the trail toward our car, holding a large stick. Since we were in the car, we just drove out of there, very shook up. We chalked it up to some dude on one hell of a drug trip. We never told our parents about the incident and we never went back there. Not on a trail, but walking my dog late at night. It was about 1 a.m. My dog rang her bell, and I begrudgingly got up to take her outside. When she wants to pee in the middle of the night, I don't take her very far, just into our side yard. I grabbed a flashlight in case she decided to poop so I could pick it up. I was standing there waiting for her to do her thing. She was doing the classic dog circle walk, when all of a sudden she got spooked and whipped around. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw this woman just standing there. I didn't see her walk up. I didn't hear her walk up. She was just standing there, super still. Based on her position, she had to have come from between my house and my neighbor's house, which was odd because our houses back up to a greenbelt. It was probably around 40 degrees outside, and this woman, maybe about 20 years old, was in super short shorts and a t-shirt. I looked at her and told her she scared me. She mumbled something like, "Nice night, what are you up to?" Standing there holding the leash, I said, "I'm walking my dog." Then she said, Cool, do you know how to get into my house?" I locked myself out, and pointed to my neighbor's house. Now, I'm a good American, I know my neighbors, and she wasn't one of them. My neighbor is a single woman in her 30s who hangs out with my wife, so I know her pretty well. I asked, "That house?" and pointed directly at my neighbors. She nodded. I said, "You don't live there." "I know who lives there." She just scoffed and wandered into my backyard. I followed her and asked, "What the hell are you doing?" Then she took off running and scaled my fence. Side note, it's not an easy fence to scale. It's a deer fence, 3 feet of cattle gate topped with stainless steel wire running horizontally. It's the kind of thing you trip over easily if you weren't expecting it, especially since it's hard to see and not very common. Anyway, she cleared it and ran off into the greenbelt. I always carry a pocket knife and, fortunately, had my, unfortunately useless, dog with me. I checked around my house and the neighbor's house for anyone else, shined my light into the greenbelt, and nothing. I have no idea how she got back there, what she was doing, or what she intended to do, but she scared the ever-living shit out of me. My girlfriend and I had driven down an old dirt road that ran beside a lake on one side and mountains on the other. We were looking for unexplored territory to hike in. The dirt road eventually became a trail and was completely swallowed up by the forest. Once it became impassable by car, we got out and hiked for quite some time before making our way back to the car as the sun was going down. It was a challenge getting the car turned around, but I finally managed and we were off. It was slow going, since the road was rough and it was getting dark fast. Suddenly we came to a fork in the path that hadn't been visible coming the other way. Neither of us had any idea whether to go right or left, so I picked randomly, hoping either one would take us back to the main road. As we rounded a small curve, our headlights lit up a man dragging a large hockey duffel bag off the trail and into the woods. As soon as the lights hit him, he froze completely still. Driving past him felt like an eternity. We could not have been doing more than 5 miles an hour because of how bad the road was. My girlfriend and I didn't say a word until we were well past him, at which point we both said, "What the fuck was that?" And then the road ended. Just like the spot we had stopped at earlier, the forest had swallowed up this part of the road too. We were going to have to turn around and drive past the man with the human-sized duffel bag again. I told my girlfriend to buckle up and hold on tight, because at the first sign of trouble I was going to gun it. We came to the spot where the man had been, and he was nowhere to be seen. We eventually made it to the right path and got the fuck out of there. The weirdest thing about it was that there wasn't a vehicle anywhere near that guy for 50 miles in either direction. We would have seen it if there had been. We had traveled as far as possible both ways, and there was just no place to pull off the road. How the hell did he get there? Where was he going? What was in the bag? I go out for walks very late at night fairly often, so I've seen a few things. The creepiest, though, happened about 2 months ago. I left the house around 1:30 a.m., and it started off as a normal walk. I wandered around the town until about 2 a.m., when I decided to go home. I was walking back along the route I had come when I noticed a black van meandering down the street. I didn't really pay too much attention to it at first. I did pay attention, though, when I saw it slowly drive by me a second time. I wasn't entirely sure it was the same van, so I just continued walking, but this time I kept an eye out. And, lo and fucking behold, about 10 minutes later the same damn black van came down the street again. This time I knew for sure because it didn't have license plates. Now I was fairly scared, so I picked my pace up a little bit. When the van came around again it stopped in the middle of the road a few houses in front of me. I stopped, turned around, and booked it back in the other direction. I made a few turns onto different roads and then ran right into someone's yard. I waited behind their fence, and the same fucking van came down the street. I assumed that when they couldn't find me they finally decided to fuck off. I waited in that yard for about 20 minutes before I ran back to my house and practically threw myself through my bedroom window. I went backpacking and fishing overnight with a female friend. We're both fairly experienced backpackers and it was a spot we'd visited many times before on the Salmon River in upstate New York. We also brought her collie along with us. We parked in the same spot we always did at the end of a dirt road and hiked about 45 minutes to our favorite fishing spot. We had a great day knocking back beers, swimming, and pretending to fish. We put out the fire and went to bed around midnight. We were awakened about 3 a.m. by the creepiest noise I've ever heard. It honestly sounded like a demon, groaning and growling maybe 5 feet back from the edge of our site in some thick brush. Her usually fearless dog was cowering in the corner of our tent. I was kinda spooked but calmed myself down, ran through the local wildlife in my head, and decided it was probably a bobcat. For anyone who doesn't know, bobcats aren't very dangerous, but they can make some supremely freaky noises. Their territorial growls often sound like human screams or crying babies. I grabbed my mess kit, the Boy Scouts of America style one where one half is a frying pan and the other is a bowl, and headed outside to try to scare it off. I repeatedly bashed the two halves together as loudly as I could to frighten it, which has always worked in the past. I've even run off black bears a few times with this method. The thing did not move. If anything, it got closer. I try not to attribute human emotions to wild animals, but the growling sounded angrier. At this point my friend and the dog were out of the tent, and Mr. Fearless was trying with all his might to drag her back down the trail toward the road. I shone my light into the dark and it reflected off a pair of eyes that I swear looked human, peering out from a bush at about chest height. Maybe it was crouching, maybe it was standing on something, but it sure wasn't a bobcat. I'm not proud of this, but we fled in disarray, slept in the car in a McDonald's parking lot, and went back to get our stuff in daylight. Nothing was taken, but the site was tossed, even the tent interior. The one sensible thing I managed during our retreat was re-zipping the tent, but it was open, not clawed open but unzipped. Still have no idea what the hell that thing was. Haven't camped there since. A mountain lion, 2 to be exact. We were 19. This was before we went hiking during the day. We set up arrangements, gathered gear, food, and water, and made our way there. We used bug repellent, turned on our lights, and started. Near the halfway point I saw a weird-looking bush. When I got closer, it was a mountain lion. I guess we were causing a ruckus. Anyone in that situation would guess a mountain lion would check out the noise. Anyway, I told my friend to stand very still so we would not trigger its instincts. Then we heard a thud. My friend turned around, and boom, another one. It must have smelled the food in our backpacks, so we were basically screwed. I whispered, "Stay quiet and still so they will not eat us." He nodded. We had a staring contest with the cougars. After what felt like an eternity, they both went back to wherever they came from. So did we. Car camping, if that counts. My girlfriend and I were on a cross-country trip and planned to sleep in our car at a national campground. I do not remember the official term. We heard Devil's Canyon was nearby, so we headed there. The road was a single-lane gravel path with 6-foot-tall grass and foliage on either side, but we figured the campground would be nice. We drove for what felt like 10 minutes on that one-lane road at about 2:30 a.m. When we finally arrived, there was only one other car in the entire place. We circled twice to be sure. A guy stood outside his camper by a fire, a hatchet leaning against a stump. We parked for a moment and said, "Fuck it," then tried to lie down, but within minutes we both agreed that if we stayed the night we would either wake up to him jerking off outside our windows or he would murder us in our sleep. So we drove another 2 hours to the nearest hotel. It was during a 5 or 6 day backpacking trip I took with the Boy Scouts in the Sierras. A few days and we stopped at a big lake. While we were setting up camp, an older-looking dude, probably early to late 40s, and a girl, maybe 19 to 22, showed up and started setting up their camp, too. While the boys and I were fishing, we overheard our scoutmaster talking to them about smellables, foods and other stuff that attract bears, because they seemed pretty unaware of what counts as a smellable. The next day we got up early, broke down camp, and headed for the top of a mountain. That evening, as we set up camp again, our scoutmaster got worried because the other backpackers never showed up or passed us. At the end of the trip we stopped at the ranger station, and our scoutmaster asked about the duo. The ranger said there were no people matching their description in the books. We were weirded out and decided we had seen the ghosts of 2 backpackers who got mauled by a bear, which made a great story to tell the new scouts for a while. Years ago, when I was in my late teens, my cousin, for friends, and I went camping about 90 minutes north of where we lived in the Bay Area of California. We set up at a regular campground for 3 days and nights of partying. Some other campers, locals living within a 20 to 30-minute drive, told us stories about a section of the woods that was supposed to be off limits because of paranormal activity. As soon as I heard that, I decided we had to check it out. My cousin and one friend were down to go. Our other 3 friends thought it was bullshit and stayed behind to get more drunk and stoned, so we headed out on the second night. We got directions from a couple and left around 11 p.m. It took about 20 minutes on dirt roads, going slow so we would not pop a tire, then we parked, got out on foot, and hiked single file along what looked like a game trail for roughly the same amount of time. After about 30 minutes we saw a glow up ahead. We kept walking but quieter. When we were about 300 yards away we could tell it was a bonfire with several smaller fires around it. At about 250 yards we could hear people and started to get spooked, but like naive kids we kept going. Around 70 or 80 yards out we realized we had stumbled onto some kind of ritual. We could not see what they were wearing, but in the firelight we counted maybe 12 to 15 people around the main fire chanting and sometimes yelling. One guy, probably the leader, would walk to the edge of the circle of flames, disappear into the dark for a few seconds, then return and do something that made the rest yell louder. Stupid and curious, we crept closer, but someone spotted us. He stared for a few seconds, then started walking toward us. We were only about 50 feet away. That was enough to send us running as fast as we could without losing each other. The guy yelled, it was definitely a man, and we heard people crashing through the forest behind us. Thank God we had a head start. We reached my cousin's truck, piled in, and tore out of there for the first quarter mile. Needless to say, we have never gone back. I camp elsewhere now. I was home alone. It was a day in Ramadan, so all shops close at 3 a.m. The area where I live has plenty of shops. I got out of the house to get something from the pharmacy, open 24/7, but I forgot it was Sunday and all the other shops were closed. It was completely dark, I could barely see the sidewalk. I went into the pharmacy, and when I came out I saw someone about 20 feet away wearing a hoodie and an anonymous mask. I froze. All of a sudden he started walking toward me. I was 15, an easy target, until he was like 10 feet away, then he started fucking running at me. I ran as fast as I fucking could until I reached a police station a block from my house, and I didn't see him behind me. I told the cops about him and they escorted me home. I was panicked as fuck. I went to my room, checked the balcony for anyone, and I saw him with another guy staring at me from the sidewalk for about 5 minutes before they left in their car. Creepiest experience of my life. My friends and I used to camp and hike in northern Arizona. We usually had a big group of about 10 to 12, and one of our favorite things was playing tag after dark. On the first evening we arrived it was already getting dark, so we would have to wait until the next day to hike. We quickly set up camp, and once it was dark we decided to play hide and seek. We paired off to be safe while the two hunters used walkie-talkies to communicate and find us. I preferred staying close to camp, because 9 times out of 10 the hunters would head straight for the woods. My partner and I hid on a hill surrounded by rocks and dead trees, a perfect spot with a clear view of the campground so no one could sneak up on us. While we waited we saw someone return to camp, and we instantly knew it was not one of our friends. The figure was about 7 feet tall but looked skin and bone frail. He kept shaking his head violently, like he had a twitch or was on drugs. He was holding something shiny and metal. When he passed a lantern we had hung earlier I saw it was a hatchet. At that point we were both freaked out. We still had cell service, so I posted in our group chat. Someone is at our camp, return as soon as possible, this is not a game. Knowing the others would come soon, my friend and I decided to charge the guy from our hiding place, hoping to scare him off. The moment we stepped out, the man turned toward us, as if he had known we were there all along. We ran at him, but he did not budge. We stopped about 20 feet away, waiting for any reaction, but there was none. He just stood there with a blank face, watching us. My friend yelled, asking what he was doing and what he wanted. The man suddenly grinned, an unnaturally wide grin, as my friend kept shouting. Then 5 of our friends charged into camp. It was like the man knew they were there too, because the moment they gave chase he took off. He was faster than any of us, which seemed impossible given how he looked, and we lost him almost immediately. We regrouped at camp, and by the time we got back the rest of the group had arrived. We told them what happened and debated whether to leave. Since there were 12 of us we figured we would take turns keeping watch. It was just one guy, what could he do to all of us? We unwound by the fire, smoked for a while, and then decided to sleep. Later we woke to our friend AJ yelling outside the tents. It was still dark and he had been on watch, but something had scared him. He said he kept hearing something big moving around the camp just out of sight. We checked but found nothing. Once we were sure it was safe we went back to the tents. Just as we started getting in, the same man from before leaped out of one of them. We stood in shock a moment too long, and before we could react he was running away again, laughing hysterically as he disappeared. After that we packed our gear as fast as we could and got out of there. We still hike in that area, but we have never camped there again. Relevant background information. I have always loved to dance. When I was 9 we moved into a bungalow. My new bedroom had a big, wide window that took up roughly half the wall, and for some reason I did not have any curtains. It was weird in hindsight, but it suited me just fine because at night the window served as the perfect mirror for me to watch myself dance, and I would pretend I was in my own studio. The window faced the backyard, which was loosely fenced with a worn-out fence that offered little privacy, but my single mom worked a lot and was barely getting by, so replacing the fence was not a major priority. One summer, I had just gotten back from visiting family in Europe. I was 12. My mom and brother had also been on the trip but had returned home about a month earlier. I went into my room and noticed that my mom had hung curtains. It struck me as odd even then because she was not the type to spontaneously do nice things for me, but I assumed she had missed me and wanted to make my room cozier for when I got back. I forgot about it until about a week later, when I mentioned the curtains. Before my mom could say anything, my younger brother said, "You have not told her." Told me what? Apparently, while I was away my mom and brother were hanging out in the living room, right beside the front door, one night when my dog suddenly started barking like someone was at the door. It was past midnight, so my mom was understandably freaked out, especially being there alone with a 10-year-old. There was no knock, but the dog kept going, so they turned off the lights to see if something was outside. They saw 2 people walking around the front yard with flashlights, then turning the corner into the backyard. My mom opened the door just wide enough to let the dog out to investigate. Someone yelled for her to get the dog under control, and they realized it was 2 police officers. My mom got the dog in and asked what was going on. They told her they were responding to a call reporting a man seen sitting in a tree on the southwest corner of our backyard, staring into a window. You can probably guess which window. I did not sleep in my room for a month after that and could not think about it without feeling on the verge of a panic attack for years. Since then, I have always been very vocal about people having curtains. You may not suspect it, but you never know who could be watching you from the dark. Fleeing in the 90s from Iran to the Soviet Union on foot. It was dark, and we were in 3 cars with women, children, and men. Back then I was still a child. I remember everything very clearly. The cars stopped in the middle of nowhere. All the lights were turned off so the military could not see us. First all the luggage was quickly thrown out of the cars, then everybody got out, and the cars drove away. There we were, in the middle of nowhere with a bunch of families, about 20 or 30 people. It was pitch dark. We had instructions to walk away from the road, and from there we would reach the border of Turkmenistan. As we were walking between the mountains we arrived at a huge open field. Suddenly 3 huge spotlights turned on the mountains far away, trying to spot us. My father quickly told everybody to lie flat so they would not see us. Women and children were crying, and I was just lying there in the grass and sand, not really understanding the danger we were in. Our biggest fear was that it was the Iranian government searching for us. After a while the lights stopped and we started to walk again. As we were walking, a truck came from far over the border. We were not sure why the people were there. As we waited and watched, we saw that it was 2 soldiers with guns heading our way. As they were running toward us, they suddenly disappeared. We looked around and saw that they had fallen into a large hole in the ground. By large I mean really large, but we could not see it because it was dark and full of high grass. Eventually we helped the soldiers out of the hole, and they told us they came to help us and were sent by the Red Cross. Also, the spotlights were from Russia or Turkmenistan and they were there to help us. In the end the 2 young soldiers brought us to a camp and gave us food and shelter.